This video will cover how to build scatterplots in R, how to add regression lines to the scatterplot, and then how to save it. Just like always, we're going to be using the 2016 wave of the General Social Survey, so the first thing that I'll do is just go ahead and load that. The basic command that we're going to be using to build scatterplots is just the plot command. And in R, you usually format this as X and then Y. So your X-axis first and then your Y-axis second for your independent variables respectively. And really that's the basics of what you need in order to build a scatter plot. And so if we actually moved from X's and Y's to real variables, let's say that we wanted to look at father's prestige as our X, and then the respondent's prestige or offspring's prestige as Y. You could just add those in, just like that. And then if you run this little line of code, you'll see over in the right pane of RStudio, the scatter plot pops up. Now, obviously there's a lot that we can and should do to improve what's going on there. So the first thing that we'll do is think through how we can change the points. And it's worth noting, by the way, before I get deep into this, that the plot command is very large and very powerful. And so you can actually spend a lot of time in the documentation for this. And it's worth knowing, kind of going into it, that you can alter any pixel in any R graphic in base R, and then more user-driven packages like the ggplot package that a lot of our users tend to drift towards after a while, and I use it myself in my own research, also give you really fine-grained control over how your plots look. But anyway, so let's say that the first thing that we wanted to do was just change the dots. And so I'll just copy the first little bit here, paste that in, and then I'm going to add a comma, go down to a new line to keep this readable. And the optional argument that you use to change the type of points that you make is PCH. And then I'm going to put in an equal sign, and the one that I like is 19, which is just a circle that's filled. And if you run it just like that, you'll see that it changes the way that the dots are presented. And you know, there are a whole bunch of different options that are available to you. So I'm going to type in 15 here. I'm not quite sure what this will produce. And then you do, so it looks like a filled square. So, you know, you can look through all the different options. It's pretty easy to find these with just a Google search. And so I'll just put it back to 19. The other thing that you'll sometimes want to do is manipulate the color of the points. And so here, the way that you do that is you just type COL for color, and then an equal sign, and then you can open up quotes and type in the specific name of a color that you want. Of course, the default is black, as you can see, but if you wanted to switch those to red, you could just type in red in quotes. It's also worth noting, and if you run this, you can see it just updates the color of the points. It's worth noting that you can add complex colors, so if you want to create hex colors or something like that, R will accept those too. The other things that you'll typically want to do are to add the labels to your X and Y axes, and so to do that, you would just I'm going to just add a new line and type xlab for x-axis label equals, and then in quotes, you would just put whatever it is that you want. So for me, I'll put father's prestige, and then you would go down and do your y-axis label. And so here you would just do ylab for y-axis, and then respondents prestige, right? And so if you run it like this, you'll see that my plot will update itself, and now the proper labels are there. Last, sometimes you'll want to add the main title, and so here you would just add another comma. I'm going to go down to a new line to keep it readable and type main equals, and then, you know, main title, whatever you want to put in there. Run it like that, and you'll see that everything pops up as expected. The other thing that you sometimes want to do with these plots is add a regression line to them. So in order to do that, it's a couple of extra little steps. So first, I'm going to just quickly fit a bivariate regression model where my dependent variable is respondent's prestige, my independent variable is father's prestige. I'm going to cover this command much more exhaustively in another video, but for now, you just create an object. I'm going to call it M1, gets the result of LM for linear model, press G10, given press 10, And then the optional argument for the data frame would just be entered as data equals GSS here. And you can see when I run that, I'm going to get a new object showing up, which is just the results of that regression analysis. Now, to actually add the line, you would just type AB line, and then type in the name of the model object. And if you want to set the color of it, you can do all that stuff here. So col equals blue if you wanted a blue line. And now if I run all of this together, you'll see that the regression line pops up. It's a little bit faint there, so if you want to make it a little thicker, you could type comma LWD equals 3 or something like that, run it all again, and then you'll see that you get a much thicker line. And so that's really the basics of putting these things together. The other thing that's worth noting is how are you going to export that into something where you could maybe paste it into a Word document or some other sort of file that you're working off of. And to do that, there are export options that are available to you in RStudio. So if you go over there, you can save it as various types of things or copy it to your clipboard. Typically, you don't want to do it that way because when you create your plots in RStudio, the dimensions of them sometimes get a little bit off. So I'd recommend that you do it like this. So first thing, clear all of the plots that you have. And you can do that by pressing this little broom over here. And that will ask you if you want to get rid of all the plots, and you say yes. And then from there, what you want to do is use a command that will allow you to write interactively to disk. And so most of the time you'll want to use PNG, which is a type of graph that used a lot for kind of online stuff, but it can also be pasted into Word pretty easily. And then you would just type in the name of the file that you want. So you could call it myplot.png. And then you go down to the bottom after you've finished adding all the different tweaks to your graph and type dev.off. And so you can basically think of line 8 is starting the writing process, and then line 17 is ending it. And if you do that, so you just highlight that whole thing and you run it, you'll see that you get null device 1, which is what you want, and there are no plots showing up here. So then the question is, where did that graph go? Well, if you look, it is going to show up in whatever your working directory is. So right there, I just have in my E drive, my copy of the GSS and then the plot that I just made. And so from there, you could just copy and paste that into into Word or something like that. If you're not entirely sure where R might have saved the graph, then you can just use the get WD command, and that'll tell you where the graph is. So here it's just saying that it's in my E drive, which is exactly where you found it. So just get WD, and then it'll just tell you its current working directory, which is probably something you've already set yourself, as I did, up on lines 2 and 3. And that's it.